Hi, everybody. My name is Elliot Olson. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the trans, non binary, and intersex program officer at the New Haven Pride Center. Thank you so much for joining us across the many platforms that we have right now. Um, Before we begin, though, I want to take a moment and acknowledge the land on which we are hosting this event. The New Haven Pride Center was founded and operates on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scotticoke, Golden Hill, Paugussett, and Niantic peoples, as well as Quinnipiac peoples. I'm so sorry. If you want to know more about the lands that you occupy, feel free to follow the link posted below on the screen right now, native lands at native-land.ca. And please take a moment to acknowledge and honor the native people whose lands you occupy and the history of the place that you are in. So, welcome to New Haven Pride Center's continuing programming during Trans Week of Awareness. I am so happy that you will have gotten here and are watching. If you want to see our full schedule, you can go to newhavenpridecenter.org and look at the TDOR schedule. During Trans Week of Awareness, we are bringing you events and art exhibits, panels, and much more. However, all of this leads up to November 20th, this coming Saturday, which is Trans Day of Remembrance, where we take a moment to think about those who were lost during this last year due to violence. If you would like to be part of the vigil that we will be holding on the Green in New Haven, November 20th at 3 p.m. is where it will be at. If you have any questions, you can always contact me too at the email shown below, trans@newhavenpridecenter.org. So today's panel I am super excited about. We will be talking with some amazing panelists about the experiences of trans men. Transmasculinity and transmasculine individuals are often synonymous with invisibility in a lot of ways, especially in queer and trans spaces that are too often dominated by other identities. So thinking with that foundational underpinning, in this panel, trans men will be discussing the unique struggles that transmasculine people face, the resilience that comes from having transmasculine peers. And we're also hoping to break down some myths, maybe, about trans men's lives and experiences and identities. Panelists will talk through questions like, how does transmasculine experience differ from transfeminine ones? Kind of really simple. But also more so, how can we as a community ensure that we aren't erasing identities, particularly in this conversation, trans masculine identities within these spaces? So let's dive into the conversation. I am super excited about this. Let me introduce to you our panelists. First off, we have Layne. I'm sorry, Layne. I'm going to mispronounce your last name. I know I am.
That's all right. It's Gianakos.
Gianakos. Okay.
Yes.
I was making it more complicated. So, just to say a little bit about Layne, He is currently an equity consultant for healthcare organizations after a long career between APNH and Anchor Health. At APNH, he was part of the team providing direct services to those with HIV, and later on at Anchor Health, he created a unique case management program specifically designed for LGBTQ plus people, which is still in use today. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Next, I want to introduce Zih. Hi. I want to double check real quick. Do you prefer Zih or Domenia? Zih?
Zih.
Dope. So, also talking a little bit about your background, a trans man born in New Haven and raised in Connecticut, a graduate of the Sound School, and a Horatio Alger National Scholar. He studied at Palm Beach Atlantic University for your undergraduate in psychology. A Dean's and Honors student, as well as a Foster Care to Success Scholar and a Martha V. Green Scholar. You're just making all of us look bad here. Currently, you're a graduate student at Indiana Wesleyan University of Social Work, Social Work and Positive Psychology, and also actively works in a recovery program with a focus on supporting veterans and people experiencing homelessness. Next up, we have Winter Madison. Whoop. There we go. Hey. Winter is a queer, non-binary trans man who grew up in Connecticut and currently studies at the California Institute of the Arts. I will personally plug Winter, who is an amazing artist, and you absolutely should check out the Instagram. Like, if I had more money. That being said, he is a prolific painter and has found art to be a massive source of empowerment in finding and sharing his truth. He frequently shares that his art has evolved and deepened in impact throughout the course of his transition, which resonates with many other trans artists, and I can definitely attest to that. In Connecticut, he was active with the activism community and advocacy against racism, police brutality, and anti-LGBT bigotry, and hopes to start doing the same work on the West Coast. Just to plug you even more, Winter's artwork can be found on Instagram at Winter Dior, Dior _. And lastly, but very much not least, we have Ace Ricker joining us for the panel. Hello. An educator and advocate for over 15 years, working within a wide variety of organizations, religious forums, and nonprofits, and has delivered diversity and inclusion workshops and materials on topics like suicide prevention, LGBTQ plus awareness, for sex, rape culture and sexism, religion and spirituality, and so much more. He plans to continue working to eliminate ignorance throughout Connecticut communities, both on his own and with others in the LGBT community. I am so happy that you are here, and that you are all part of the panel today. I think it's going to be a great conversation. So I will hand it over now to our fantastic moderator, Layne, and we can get the conversation going.
All right, sounds good. Thank you again to the New Haven Pride Center for having us. It's rare that we can have conversations like this with a group of transmasculine individuals, so I'm grateful for that opportunity. Just diving right in, perhaps one of our most general questions, what does having a trans brotherhood mean to you? And by that, we specifically also are talking about what does it mean to have the support of other trans men as opposed to people in the larger LGBTQ community?
I think it's really important to have people like in your corner that know what you are going through specifically. Whereas like connecting with like other queer people is great, but to know other trans men is like a very specific thing.
I think for myself, I'll do kind of like the shorter because I know with the many questions we have, there'll be more in depth. But definitely what Winter said, the vast diversity that we have as transmasculine individuals, and to to really understand and recognize that there is so many unique complexities that each of us have, and in a sense, that's something that as trans individuals and trans men that we have to and should reflect on, because sometimes we also do find conflict with each other because we get kind of boxed into our own ideas on what trans masculinity looks like. And that's definitely an exciting thing with having conversations like this, is saying yes, we can have trans brotherhood in a sense, but also remember, let's not cluster ourselves into another box that we've been trying to get out of our life.
Great. And so you were talking a little bit about being in that specific box. Do you find that it's difficult to find communion with other LGBTQ individuals because there's that box of transgender man, or do you find that there's a connection with the brotherhood within that that can help facilitate the conversation?
For myself, I think the box is kind of using gender specific with feminine and masculine. We always like masculine is directed toward men and femininity is directed toward women, and I I find that a lot of times I get pushed in that box with having feminine activities per se. Like I sing, I do poetry, um, as well as with facial features, with facial hair. I've very much so pushed into a dynamic where, yeah, I do like to cut down wood and play sports, but it shouldn't subject me to only one side of what society sees men should be doing. And so it can kind of corner us at points. And sometimes I think because we've been put into a box so long that we as individuals don't want to be subjected to certain discrimination or ostracized from other men, especially when you're trying to just feel welcomed, sometimes in cis men communities, that you kind of follow the trend or like examples of things on what type of clothes you should be wearing, or if they're more androgynous, that you might be ostracized for that as a trans man because you don't fit the label as what a guy should be.
So speaking a little bit more about that and masculinity. Oh, Z, do you want to add something?
Well, I was gonna say that I kind of feel I do feel like there is this kind of reconstruction or this reconstruction of a box, in that the trans community and trans masculinity is trying to come up without what come out of it. It's like the cisgender men community have placed us within a box, but also the LGB community has also placed us within a box, and we ourselves are trying to live outside of that and find ourselves within that. So the whole point of a brotherhood and embracing one another is essential and key, because it's kind of saying, one, we're all accepted, we're all loved, we're all valued and welcomed, and also that there's no one way to be trans and there's no one way to be a man. And I think that's essential to keep at the forefront, because if not, you're saying you're only a man if you're hiking and wearing Timbs and doing this, or you're only a man if you're wearing this type of clothing and flannel, versus you can be a man and wear a skirt and be just as manly, or you can, like just trying to live outside the box. And I think that's where Ace was really going for, and I really agree with that. And I think we have to fight that. I think that's the fight daily, is constantly redefining ourselves to defeat the reconstruction or the construction of what is placed on us daily, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And both of you were speaking a lot about masculinity and how we come to understand masculinity. Without an understanding of what masculinity is, I don't think any of us would have arrived at our ideas about who we are, especially as transmasculine individuals. So can you speak to how your understanding of masculinity or manhood has specifically shaped your experiences as a transgender man?
Well, it's been very hard for me being a transgender man, because it's like, not only am I a transgender man, I'm a transgender Black man. So not only do I have to fit in the world as a transgender man and find out what it's like. I wasn't raised by men. I was raised in a foster care system. So I was already raised without parenting. I was raised by a system of social workers. So I was raised without that. So I was raised without the normal parenting norms. So then you have to raise me. Then I'm coming out as a man. So I'm trying to find out, what is it a man is supposed to do? What is the correct norms, identities? What is the correct behavioral patterns of a man? And then you have the whole, what is the correct way of being a Black man in a more modernized white society? And so then I'm trying, not only am I trying to find acceptance in the LGBT community as a trans man, I'm also trying to find acceptance in the Black community as a man. So it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. And I realize that not only I'm never seen anymore more as a trans man in the world, I'm seen as a Black man before a trans man. And then in the LGBT community world, I'm seen more as almost an outcast. And I'm trying to find a way in to see as a human.
Right. And I think that gets back to what we were saying about those boxes. Does anyone have any memories specifically of what you thought masculinity was, or what you thought manhood was, perhaps at a younger point in your life? And how did that help you to become the man or the masculine person that you are today?
I was raised by my dad primarily, and I really looked up to him like growing up, and I feel like I modeled a lot of my like identity after that at a younger age. But then I think like it became really hard for me to reconcile with the fact that I was a trans man as I got older, rather than like when I was younger. I feel like I connected with that even more because of like certain things that have happened to me because of men. So I think that like I struggled more with that as I grew older and wanting to even identify with men because of like what that looked like to me. So that had been like kind of like a winding journey from childhood.
For myself, being adopted and being raised in another person of color with white parents and a very very whitewashed neighborhood, hometown Shelton, Connecticut, or Huntington, very conservative. I came out of the womb rebellious, I guess, because I was hitting a lot of obstacles at such a young age, with wanting to play sports. Like I didn't follow gender roles when even at recess. When we go outside, I wasn't following what young girls were doing, hopscotch or chalk. I was getting grass stains on my pants and getting in trouble with other guys. And that really manifested into a lot of obstacles I faced where I kind of shut off for a period of time. By third grade, I stopped going to recess. I pretty much kind of became a loner and found, fortunately, at a younger age, people that I could connect with outside of the community that I was living in, and found that I had to pick and choose which battles through my youth that I would stand up for, because there was a point when I was in high school, I was surviving. I wasn't going through high school learning. I was surviving the bullying and neglect that I was getting from many different dynamics, as well as, fortunately, by high school, I found a great group of people that I call family and started doing testimonials and public speaking by 14 years old, and found that you don't have to fit in those boxes. And I never really saw myself as a young girl. I always was like, oh, I'll sing in the choir and I'll paint and then I'll go play basketball and wrestle and stuff. And I really never looked at as why do we have to have these perimeters to us? And if this is a place of growth, and like you always hear the questions like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you have this like open-ended question to you. Why should there be any options of saying I can't do one or the other or change it? And I think I just kind of ran with it in the end.
Mm-hmm. When I was asked that question when I was 4, I said that I wanted a brown mustache. So I'm happy to say, 4-year-old self, it happened. I think everyone here has already spoken about this, and Winter and Ace, you brought this up in our last question, that our childhoods are often not straightforward in the sense of being either very masculine or very feminine. So what are some myths about transgender men that you see, specifically some of those myths like, you know, all transgender men as children like to play with trucks and they don't like makeup and they don't like feminine things? What are some myths that all of you have seen that you would like to debunk?
I would like to say that they all start off as tomboys. That's the classic myth. I play with Barbie dolls. I had a Barbie dream hotel room. My mom made sure, that's my mom in the background. My mom made sure I had Barbie dolls up to galore. I love my Barbie dolls. And you know, me and my twin, we made sure we had Barbie dolls, and my twin's gay, and we played everything with Barbie dolls. I love makeup. I like playing dress up. So that is definitely a myth, that if you have, even if you have a gay child saying that if a young boy is playing with dolls, they're going to end up gay. It's one of those things. I think one of my insights of me being trans was like potty training and trying to pee like a boy and trying to take on manlier or boy characteristics, penis envy things, Freudian things. And just realizing it wasn't fair that I couldn't do what my brother could do, or that I was forced to wear a dress and shoes when I really wanted to wear a suit and tie. I think we need to get rid of the gender norms and allow children to be able to express themselves, allow children to be children, to know that children come into this world non-judgmental, pure, innocent. They know no barriers. They just know expression and fun and joy. And we should encourage their creative side and allow them to develop. And I went to a perfect high school where boys were wearing dresses, girls were wearing suits. Everything was allowed as long as you were learning. And that was essential to it. And I credit Sound School for that education, because it it was amazing. And I went to a Christian college where I was discriminated against and wasn't allowed to graduate across the stage because I was a trans man. But now that I'm going to a Christian graduate school, I'm allowed to be a part of the community as a trans man. So it's just, I think even within, I don't know, I think when it just comes to play and play theory and letting kids be kids, that doesn't dictate how they're going to be when they get older, bottom line.
Absolutely.
I think a huge myth like that really made me struggle with my own identity and, you know, coming to terms with it was that like I would be interested in girls. Like if like my masculinity would mean that like I liked girls. And like I even though I had, you know, gay uncles and like, you know, people gay men to look up to in my own life, I still struggled with this idea that like I liked boys, so like, oh, there's no way that like I am actually like a boy myself. So I think that's something that would be nice to dispel at a younger age for people.
Yeah, I think that definitely the last both Zih and Winter have great things that we would constantly try to debunk, and also religion or spirituality. Growing up within a church, being a youth deacon, being many aspects of the church, I found that there was constant, and you hear it constantly when bills are being put up through the state or federal, that religion is always the counterpoint. And for me, growing up in a Protestant church, I grew up in and was fortunate to have a very accepting community there, and now is an open and affirming church. And going into organizations and hearing the backlash that you hear, like God, that you are a sin and all this stuff, and I find that that is very inaccurate, especially when you're looking at materials through scripture and stuff like that, and the individuals who are in homes that are raised with a religious background, that there's lots of conflict where I had that at one point told to me. It's like, this is an obstacle you have to face to subdue. And I'm like, I've never felt discomfort or burning walking into a religious forum of any sort, and that there are several people that I've stayed in very good community with, Aaron Miller from MCC Hartford, and that you don't have to choose one or the other. And yes, I am more spiritual now than religious, but a lot of times there's consistent conflict through many people's lives, whether they come out very young as a trans individual or in their older years as a trans individual, that a lot of times I find that religion is the thing that kept stopping them from transitioning or even processing some of the thoughts that they've been having.
Absolutely, definitely. So, how would we like to see changes in the world to empower transgender men, whether it's in arenas such as the church, within a foster care system, within the world of art? You know, I find that we have a good panel here because all of you sort of have your own irrespective backgrounds, and it's a really diverse group. So, what would you like to have transmasculine empowerment look like in your circles?
I'll go first on this one. I am a minister, and I graduated from a evangelical college, and I grew up Southern Baptist, and I would like to see more inclusivity and more acceptance. I would like to see more love and less hatred, more appreciation for one's differences instead of separate versus equal, separate, but equal, because those two don't align with each other. I think in a foster care system, I think there's a lack of foster homes that are sensitive to the needs of foster care children who are LGBT. And there's a lot of children and young teenagers who are LGBT, and they need to find loving homes who will nurse their creative side through art, dance, literature, science, theology, whatever it may be, but allow them to express their gender expression, gender identity, sexuality in a healthy, nurturing way, because obviously they don't come from a nurturing home experience. And I think Connecticut is on a ballpoint of trying to find more homes, but Connecticut has a lot more residential and group homes that don't always foster and balance those commitments. And I think that's where Connecticut can go a lot farther at. And I was raised in more group homes and residentials than I were in foster homes. And I think when it comes to institutionalized education, especially religious ones, because those are the ones that I've attended, I think we shouldn't be treated as we're sinners or these aliens or mythological creatures that just don't exist for any type of reason. We should be treated as these humans are beautiful creatures of God, and we have to contribute to this world to change it, to make it a better place, which is why we're in the institution of learning. That's what I have to say.
I think for me, like, I grew up with a pretty progressive background. Neither of my parents were either all that religious. Both of them were artists. My mom is a feminist. But like I did not feel comfortable coming out until my late 20s. And I think like I would have had the perfect environment for coming out much younger. But I think that even in progressive circles, there's this issue of like, my parents were very excited to raise a strong Black woman. And they really like pushed that on me. So they were fine with all the things that I did that were tomboyish or whatever, playing sports, they didn't discourage those things. But still nobody asked me like how I really truly felt about myself and how I saw myself. I even had other people who, were in more progressive circles as well, put those titles on me and fetishize me for being strong Black woman. And like, I think that although people think that they're trying to empower you in coming from that like more positive space, it can really like put you in a box that you don't have the room to then say, no, well, that's not actually how I identify or how I feel about myself. So I think that in more artistic realms, maybe you think that you're like empowering your kid, but you should probably be just more communicating with them about how they see themselves.
Absolutely. A lot of what you said, I think of the scene in the L Word when the character Max came out as transgender, and Kit, who was a cisgender woman, said to him, "Why can't you be the strongest, butchest woman that there is? Why do you have to be a man?" And I really was thinking about that with your background.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, Layne, because kind of to go off of that, a lot of times some conflicts that we have as trans individuals, especially trans men that I've personally faced, is that I've gotten cornered in the question of like, well, you just became a man because society portrays men as the power dynamic. And when I was 5 years old, I wasn't worried about a power dynamic at all. I was worried, when am I going to get Lincoln Logs or my new Legos or something like that? And kind of to reflect back on what everyone has said here is, for a period of time, my parents, when I came out as trans, we separated. They did not agree with with how I have identified, and fortunately we are now in very good rapport, and they respect and accept me and so forth. But I also found growing up that there's always this dynamic that parents place us in. Like, they have already planned our future. They've already painted our trail, painted the canvas, the legacy we're going to have, and we don't get say in that. And like what Winter was saying is that we're put in these boxes when we're in the sandbox. We're trying to figure ourselves out. So why are you cornering us? You're like, oh, be creative. Well, you're not letting us be creative. Oh, find yourself. Well, you're not letting us find ourselves. And even now, so with reflecting on, unfortunately, with this pandemic, you have these individuals already in hostile situations where they're dealing with trauma. And now you have young kids that are now dealing with this trauma in school and now having to deal with finding their identity on top of it. So we already have had struggles growing up. And then, unfortunately, the pandemic happened. And I have heard, unfortunately, from listening to some youth support groups, that they don't have time to express themselves at all because they're sitting in front of a screen, or they're being told to do something, because everything has been delayed over a year. And so everyone is now even more so on the fast track. When we were in high school, we had to figure out what we were doing in college. And when we were in college, we should be married and have kids and have and we really need to slow down in that regard. And I really reach out to parents in this regard, that a lot of times I get the question, well, what can I do to be there and show my love and show my acceptance? And I said, just be there and listen to your kid, because the best person to get advice from is your own kid, not me, who may only know mere information that you are providing to me.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that. And what we were all sort of getting at with that is this idea that transgender men, we come out, we go into testosterone, our voices drop, maybe we grow facial hair, and then we disappear, right? We become invisible. We've passed, we fit into that society, we pass as men, and we know that oftentimes that's not actually true. So how do you find that balance between sort of being invisible and being comfortable with your gender expression versus not having visibility, maybe especially in LGBTQ spaces?
I mean, but the question is, do we really, 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 really ever really pass? Like, that's the question I've always asked myself. Like, do we really go in stealth mode, as they call it? Do we really ever become so under the radar that we no longer have to worry about, like, I haven't had top surgery, so I always have to worry about binders. Then I always have to worry about binders not fitting because my chest is bigger. So I always have to worry about spending more money than normal. And then I have to worry about, the question is when I'm dating, oh, do you have bottom surgery? That's a common question when you're dating. Are you going to have bottom surgery? I hate when people ask me that. It's none of your damn business. And then you have, like, then I feel like even when you're dating I feel like for the rest of your life, for eternity, you always have to always come out, because it's kind of like, yes, you're on testosterone, yes, you have top surgery, or yes, you have bottom surgery, but you can't produce sperm. So you always have to come out that part, because creating a family is going to be a forever different dynamic from a cisgender family. And it can feel like walking on eggshells. I've had dating experiences just completely flat on me because of that. It's like, I thought you were this, but you're not this, so now I don't want to talk to you. Or it's because you're a fetish. Or it's because you're a fling. And it's like you're trampled on. So the question is, like, do you really ever really go on stealth mode? Because you're constantly always having to come out. you're constantly always having to reveal something about yourself. So it's kind of like, I wasn't able to come out until my grandmother died. When my grandmother died, I was able to say, you know what, screw it. I'm able to be the man that I want to be because I was only holding myself for her. And when I came out, my whole family disowned me except for my mother in the background. I lost all 8 aunts, 7 uncles, 4 uncles, and about 36, 46 cousins. No one talked to me, not even my twin brother. So it's kind of like, do you ever really go in stealth mode? Even when you apply for work and you apply for insurances and stuff, you still have a mode of always coming out. So invisibility to me is BS. Sorry.
No, those are really great points. Yeah, Winter.
I agree with you. I think like the flip side to that is like, well, first of all, I agree that you don't ever really truly become invisible, but I think that some of this invisibility that we're talking about, not within the LGBTQ community, but just like out in the world as men, is experiencing a level of the privilege that like men have, like moving through the world. So it can like feel like an invisibility, but like it's just like kind of like gaining like that privilege, and like that can feel uncomfortable to think about as a trans person, especially as like a trans person of color. But like I have noticed that things have changed for me in the way that I move through the world, and like the harassment that like I have endured when I was walking through the world as a woman. But I think that in the LGBTQ community, it's a little bit different, because I think that people are focused on empowering maybe like other groups, and not as much focus on trans men.
Yeah, and that invisibility was a really good comment that came through, that with that supposed invisibility that I think all of us are pretty much in agreement doesn't really exist, that can carry an extra level of violence. I know for myself, personally speaking, when I go out into the world, typically I pass for a man. I might pass for a gay man, but I pass for a man. And the situations in which I found myself potentially to experience violence has been at gay bars, ironically. I can think of the times that I was cornered in a gay bar bathroom because I sat to pee, and this person was aggressive towards me because there was an assumption that I was cisgender, right? It was because there was the assumption that based on my appearance, there's no possible way that I could be a trans person. So I think that we have conversations in the larger LGBTQ community that sometimes we don't talk about the issues transmasculine people experience. And often there is this assumption that, well, now you have the power, right? It's what Ace was saying earlier with power dynamic. You transitioned, you're now in that gender role where you have the power. So therefore you hold different things in the community, and we don't have the conversations about how you might be at risk for violence. And this is something that, you know, sort of in contrast to hypervisibility that trans feminine people experience. So I don't know if anybody has any words about that sort of hypervisibility we see on one end of the trans spectrum versus the invisibility on the other end.
I think in regards, especially with that, looking at the privileges we do have in certain dynamics, like what Winter was saying prior, walking through different environments now, being completely seen very often as a straight acting man, I find that I'm a very blunt and vocal person, is that I've used my privilege to stand up for women, or very for individuals that are trans who may not fit what trans in some people's eyes looks like, in a trans individual should look like. And it's not saying that everyone needs to, as trans individuals, need to always be speaking up, because there is a dynamic, like you said, Layne, with violence being shown, and the possible risk of violence being done not only to the individual you're defending, but to yourself. And I can think back specifically to a work-related incident that I had several years ago, where an individual came out as being trans, had not started any transitioning and so forth, and wasn't really looking like. Not every trans person starts testosterone or gets any type of surgery or changes merely anything about them. They might just want to change their name or their pronouns. And I found that there was a lot of backlash within the workspace. And at that point, even though I wasn't trying to be stealth at this location I was at, assisting with a relocation reopening, I blatantly went upstairs and outed myself to the manager. And I said, in the state of Connecticut right now, all the things you're doing are not only protected under several laws in the state of Connecticut, but you are discriminating on magnitudes of things. And if it doesn't stop, it will be stopped because you are not doing what's right. And I was fortunate I was able to have that privilege in the position I was, because after that point, that person wasn't being dead named and was being treated the way they should always be treated. And especially within the workforce, when people don't fit a certain observation society sees, even if you do in the workforce, when your job in general, you're seen as lesser because you are serving the public, and that the customer is always right dynamic. So you always are facing like this belittling. And now add that you're a trans individual, and if you don't fit the role that someone perceives you should be fitting, you find yourself in hostile environments and hostile situations. And it's unfortunate because I have some very wonderful people that I've learned so much from that don't fit gender roles and find themselves being very transmasculine one day and then very, very feminine, transfeminine one day, where they're wearing a skirt and they have makeup on, and then the next day they're wearing a suit, and society isn't it already in a sense for that, but they need to learn to be ready for that, because there's nothing abnormal about that. We just aren't used to it because we're always put in these boxes and we're always stereotyped, and that these conversations aren't being had that need to be had.
That's really great. Thank you for saying all of that. It sounds like, we're all in agreement about many of these things. We have about 10 minutes left, so I don't know if people have maybe one or two sentences that they'd like to leave the audience with of maybe how they can empower trans people, transmasculine people.
I want to say a big thing I faced recently at my job is harassment, because my voice isn't deep, and sometimes my feminine voice will peak up and it's very high pitched. And I've been called woman, she, her. I go by my birth name because my birth name is unisex. And I say just stand up for one another and respect one another. We're all human beings. We all have different things. We all have different journeys in life. We all have different shortcomings, no matter what it is. And I'm not saying transgender is a shortcoming at all, but I'm just saying we all have different obstacles we're going through, and we all should respect each other and love each other and honor and give each other the dignity and treat each other with integrity, no matter what we're going through. Whether you're transgender, straight, bi, queer, and androgynous, intersex, anything, no matter what. That's all I have to say.
I would say, like, just stop assuming what you think people are going through and how you like what you think their lives are like, and just listen to them and their stories.
I definitely say ask the questions, but be patient and understand if the person you're asking doesn't want to answer them, to not shut down or get offended by that person that is not answering you, because they shouldn't have to educate you in any way. And that's why we have forums like this and the internet to find ways to educate ourselves. And asking the questions are really good, but also in the dynamic that I found, I can be loud and not know when to stop talking. But but also for several people that are more introverted. And if you find yourself in a workplace environment or a school where you are finding yourself discriminated against and you don't feel safe to go up to management or whomever is of authority, to know that there are resources outside of that workforce that myself, as well as a lot of other individuals, are very vocal in the point where not every trans person has to be the one screaming with the megaphone and whatnot. I'm volunteer anytime you want. Because if you're not feeling safe, come to the New Haven Pride Center and reach out for resources, or one of the individuals on here, because we are very open to having conversations or bringing about information to these companies. They don't need to know how we found out, but giving an organization a little like beep on the radar where it's like, hey, someone outside as a customer is coming to say that there's discrimination within this thing, the company is going to start perking up and being like, okay, we're doing something wrong, and people are starting to hear about it, and they need to fix their ways. So if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, please feel free to reach out to others, because I know we're vocal. So we'll reach out and do something.
That's all very true. Oh.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for this conversation. I just feel like y'all hit on so many points. And I know, there have been some like questions before, but like, I don't know. I felt like it breathed much bigger than that, right? Because of the things that are being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to thank all of you for participating in the panel and sharing your own life experiences and also just perspectives on the future around advocating for your own space within what should be our own spaces to begin with. I want to say real quick, you all reminded me of an article I came across in the Washington Post called "Crossing the Divide," which was kind of like a photo essay about trans guys, and it was all little anthologies of dudes basically talking about like, I could do these things before transitioning. Now say I'm passing or I'm stealth, and I'm like, whoa, wait, I can't do that anymore. I can't smile at children. Or one person was talking about how if somebody asked them about their day, pre-transitioning, it was like, oh, well, I did this and this. And now after transitioning in a different office, same question. And if the answer is more than all good, it's like, bye, I'm gone. So I really feel like there's a lot of things when we are dealing with what is expected for masculine people versus what has been socialized kind of into us, and how those things carry into queer and trans spaces where we don't even imagine that they might exist. But yeah, I wanted to plug that article a little bit. It's super interesting. And I just, wanted to thank you all so much for this incredible conversation. Also, a big thank you to the audience as well, and to everyone watching and joining us for today's program. This conversation hits me particularly, I gotta say, as a trans guy. This is, I don't know, being able to have a space to talk about how transmasc erasure hurts my community. We don't talk a lot about the issues that transmasc people face. It's not something that's brought up for whatever reasons. And you know, the extra level of violence that can happen if you're South, I think, you know, y'all were talking about before, and the expectations from queer and other trans folks about, like, well, there's only this version of masculinity and nothing else. These are kind of myths and stereotypes that really need to be addressed and debunked. And y'all did an excellent had an excellent conversation in doing that. I feel so lucky to be part of the New Haven Pride Center team and participate in these incredible conversations. So to let our viewers know a little bit more about the center, we are here for you year round with dynamic programming, support services. We have case management. We have a gender affirming free closet. It has binders, it has wigs, it has eyelashes. It also just has like hoodies and shoes and shirts. Feel free to stop by, shoot an email beforehand, because we are in COVID, and so we are taking registered people. Our exhibits, it's too much to say in a sentence. So if you heard anything in that list that you're interested in looking for, or participating in, you can find out about all our upcoming programming at newhavenpridecenter.org. Homepage, we have the very first page, a calendar list on the left-hand side, so you can see all the upcoming events that are going on. As I said before, and I know we're getting close to time, this is Trans Week of Awareness, and it is Trans Day of Remembrance on Saturday. So we have a lot of stuff coming up, multiple things daily. So please check it out. If you're looking for more ways to connect, I absolutely have you covered too. You can follow our social media at New Haven Pride Center at Facebook, or at New Haven Pride Center on Insta. If you're on Twitter, it's just New Haven Pride. Something also to keep in mind, and I feel like this is the tip, if you missed an event or you just want to kind of peruse the panels we've done before, we have a YouTube channel that has all of our conversations archived that we've ever done, basically. So say you want to go back and, you know, you participated in a panel and you want to look at what you did, or you want to find a permanent link that you can just keep sharing and sharing, or you heard about something but couldn't make it, please check us out. It's youtube.com/C/New Haven Pride Center. I want to say an extra thank you to Layne as well, specifically for being our moderator today. And I know you do amazing consulting, you know, and equity work, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to be part of this conversation. And yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. No, thank you, Ace, Winter, Z. Truly, like, I want this to become a series. But let me check the budget first.
Yeah, we can talk.
So wrapping up, I know we're at time. If you have any concerns, comments, questions, I am Elliot. I do the trans, non-binary, and intersex programming at the center. You can reach me at trans@newhavenpridecenter.org, or if you're just looking for a resource, if you're a parent wondering what youth programs you can get your kids involved with, you can hit us up at info, same thing, at newhavenpridecenter.org. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider joining as a member. It's completely free. And you can do this super easily through our website. It's just newhavenpridecenter.org/join now. You know, we are a community center. We're built by and for the community. If you're interested in supporting our work as we build these spaces and host more conversations and workshops and socials and events and try to create larger and more robust direct services, please consider making a donation to support our programming. You can do this by going to our website again, newhavenpridecenter.org/donate. And that is it. I will stop plugging. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you again, Layne. Thank you to the amazing panelists. I am so happy that we were able to take the time to have this incredibly important conversation.